Ever since Ryan Coogler made the first announcement about his directorial venture Sinners, excitement was high among the horror fans, and it only increased following the trailer release. After watching the movie, we can officially confirm that Ryan Coogler is just as much of a genius in the vampire horror genre as he is with a boxing film or a superhero movie. This is easily one of Coogler's most ambitious projects, with the perfect blend of period drama, horror, and social commentary. If you have watched the trailer, you already know that the movie uses vampires as a metaphor, but don't be mistaken, it is still an intense vampire feature. In this video, we will dissect the details of this Michael B. Jordan starrer vampire drama and elaborate on the implications of the thought-provoking climax. There might be a few spoilers along the way, so you have been warned. How does Sinners set up the story before the vampires are brought in? The movie begins with a quick and ominous prologue that hints about the supernatural elements that we are about to encounter in the course of the narrative. However, it quickly changes without revealing much and introduces us to the main characters, twin brothers Smoke and Stack, both roles played by the iconic Michael B. Jordan. They might share identical faces, but their distinct personalities and different ways of functioning are evident from the very beginning. The credit is due for the costume department in this regard, because the scenes do a wonderful job in avoiding any confusion about who is who. Smoke's favourite blue attires and Stack choosing red in general sorts it out, aside from the other differences between them that you start to notice gradually. The story is premised in the early 1930s, and the narrative spans across one long day and night in the rural town of Clarksdale, Mississippi, a richly imagined portrait of a deep South community. The identical twins, Smoke and Stack, have spent some time in the Chicago underworld, where they worked for Al Capone, and now they have returned to their hometown with the riches that they have acquired over the years. They have enough money to explore their dream of opening a juke joint that can cater to the locals, and with this new venture, the brothers plan to leave their troubled past behind. Very early in the movie, we are also introduced to an enigmatic blues musician, Sammy, who happens to be their cousin, and his talents are remarkable, making him the perfect fit to be the musician at the joint. Sammy is an ambitious young man who aspires to establish a music career and leave behind his reverent father's church and Mississippi. In a subtle reminder of what is about to come, the narrative also establishes in the opening voiceover that talents like Sammy have historically attracted some supernatural attention. Among the other key characters in the story are Annie and Mary, two women who have past relationships with Smoke and Stack, respectively. Smoke and Annie even had a child who died, and while he reunites with his old flame, the relationship between Stack and Mary is more complicated. Mary's recently deceased mother raised the twin brothers back in the day, and Annie has a great knowledge of local folklore, which might just come in handy. We also come across a drunken old businessman named Delta Slim, who is there to perform at the grand opening, and the Chow family, who provide food for the joint. How are the vampires introduced in the movie? How do the twins deal with the vampire threat? The evening of the opening night of the juke joint is filled with anticipation as the establishment slowly fills with patrons. Sammy is all set to perform in what can potentially be the beginning of his promising blues career. However, the presence of Mary in the joint on the day of the opening creates some initial tension and apprehension, because she is the only white woman at the predominantly black gathering. Meanwhile, a mysterious Irish drifter named Remix also arrives at the joint with two of his companions, and the twin brothers debate over whether or not to allow the strangers into the joint. Turning them away could also be risky business, as it could alert the notorious Ku Klux Klan about their establishment and pose a huge danger for them in the future. Some richly developed dialogue and character development takes the story forward, and even though a lot doesn't happen in the first 40 minutes, it never feels like that the movie is dragged or slow-paced. Approximately 40 minutes into the narrative, the genre makes a major shift as the vampire revelation changes the setting completely. It turns out that Remick and his companions are vampires, and a nasty bloodbath follows. The remaining bits of the film are transformed into an intense survival horror showdown as Smoke, Stack, and the remaining survivors barricade themselves inside the juke joint in a desperate attempt to fend off the vampire onslaught. The intriguing moments come through the reactions of various characters to this crisis that reveals deeper aspects of their personalities. As we had expected, Annie's knowledge of local folklore comes in handy, and she is the one who familiarises the group with what is actually happening around them and how they can possibly survive. Even the twins bring in their experience from their criminal past and street smarts to help defend themselves and the others. On the other hand, the vampires claim their victims, who then turn against their former friends. And there are some graphic moments that are definitely not for the squeamish. The fight continues deep into the night, and the number of survivors dwindle, as do their spirit. One thing worth observing in all this chaos is how the brothers react differently to this crisis, and while both of them are equally determined to deal with the vampire threat, one acts impulsively while the other is more methodical. There is a particularly memorable sequence towards the later part of the movie where the remaining survivors face off against both vampires and members of the Ku Klux Klan, who have also been transformed into vampires. This multi-layered confrontation has a deep historical and cultural significance, but you can also ignore that entirely and enjoy the adrenaline rush. Without spoiling it completely for you, let's just say that the climactic battle might seem somewhat abrupt and anticlimactic, given the extensive build-up, but Coogler has revealed that it is all part of his plan in executing the narrative. Don't leave the theatres just yet, because there is a mid-credit scene and a post-credits scene waiting for you. The first one has even been described by many as essential to fully understand the ambitions of the director, but we will save that for later. How have the vampires been portrayed in the movie? As we have already discussed in the video, the vampires don't show up until around the 40-minute mark, and when they finally arrive, it is quite a sight and worth the build-up. The vampires in the movie are sufficiently creepy, and their violent, bloodthirsty nature is in line with the usual vampire trope. That being said, Coogler has also ensured that there is some focus on the alluring side of these vampires. We all know that historically, vampires have often been depicted as seductive and sexual creatures, and the narrative captures the undeniable attraction in joining their undead ranks. The vampires in Sinners share a hive mind, and there is a strange sense of belongingness among the ranks. Given the times, racism and other silly reasons provoked a lot of hate between humans, and even the protagonists are not immune to such experiences. However, the vampire society is a lot more accepting, and they do not discriminate on the basis of the colour of someone's skin. Of course, the non-vampires still have a lot to fear from these vicious creatures, but their sense of unity and equality have to be applauded. They almost offer an interesting alternative society where the racial division of Jim Crow America is irrelevant. One could also view the vampires as an extension of the racist white culture back in the day that seeks to stop the party and intervene. They promise eternal freedom for joining their ranks, and this holds a great significance when you study the various characters introduced earlier who are seeking the very freedom. What is the real freedom, and which one is worth choosing? Is it the life of the oppressed, or transforming into the undead for more dignity? How does music play a key role in the narrative of Sinners? This is probably one of the key aspects that separates Sinners from the rest of the vampire films out there. It cleverly intertwines vampire lore with music, which acts as a supernatural barrier between the two realms. The music truly takes the film to another level, with the songs played by the characters and the score by Ludwig Göransson being absolutely unforgettable. Music is what brings the first half and the second half of the movie together, and the music-loving vampire drawn by the music is only an excuse to explore the deeper philosophical connotation of the narrative. Many have perceived this as Coogler's take on the takeover of black culture and music by assimilation, and the intermixing of the sacred musical space as well. What is the significance of the mid-credits scene and the post-credits scene? Will there be a sequel to this movie? We have already spoken about a mid-credits scene and a post-credits scene in the movie. Without spoiling it completely, let's just say that the first one ties to the main story and is a must-watch. The post-credits scene might not be that impactful, but it is surely worth waiting around in the theatres before you leave to truly understand the concept of the film. The idea to include these scenes might have been borrowed by Ryan Coogler from his times with the MCU as the director of Black Panther. However, their importance in setting up a potential sequel cannot be ignored. This brings us to the next big question. The possibility of a sequel certainly cannot be ruled out, even though these are still early days and there has been no confirmation from the makers. In fact, even a prequel storyline is possible, where we get to witness the criminal past of the brothers in more detail, but it is a sequel exploring the aftermath of the massacre that interests us more. While another movie is quite likely, we might have to wait and see how this one performs at the box office. There have been some early indications suggesting that the movie might actually lose money, even though it has already established itself as one of the best films of the year. Marvelous Verdict, an artsy vampire masterpiece, and possibly Ryan Coogler's best work. Sinners can so easily be mistaken for a mainstream horror film if one is not observant enough to pick up on the weighty and soulful details. Written and directed by Ryan Coogler, the movie is an experience that will keep you captivated, and the best part is that it is also a wild ride through a thrilling narrative using vampires as a metaphor. Jordan's double role performance steals the show, and one could almost say that the twins are a crooked version of a good cop, bad cop trope. Coogler integrates vampire lore and mythology into the narrative, along with his personal philosophy and realization, and it turns out to be an ode to music while also being a warning for us to introspect on the monsters among us. Music here can be viewed as an expression of cultural traditions, and on the other hand, it could also lead to temptation and greed and become corrupted. When Remick suggests that he wants Sammy's stories and his songs, it serves as a grim reminder of how cultural invasion has not always been amicable. Overall, this is a movie that you simply cannot miss out, and watch for the thrilling cinematic experience that only a handful of directors can provide in today's time. Do let us know in the comments below about your thoughts on the movie, and also share your take on Ryan Coogler's metaphorical approach. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.